Hi there, it's July the 3rd, and we're continuing our progress through the Acts of the Apostles, Luke's sequel to his Gospel, telling the story of the early church. And we're in chapter 21, and we're reading from verse 37 going through to chapter 22 and verse 16. Paul has been apprehended by the Tribune, Claudius Lysias, after a riot having ensued when he tried to come into the temple in Jerusalem at the time of Pentecost. And as he goes into the Antonia fortress, where Claudius Lysias is taking him, Paul makes an appeal to the tribune and says, wait a minute, I'd like to speak to the crowds. Now that's quite an amazing thing for Paul to say. Here is this man who is rescuing him from death, but Paul wants to make his defense. He wants this opportunity to speak to the crowd. Now, as he addresses Claudius Lysias, he addresses him in Greek, because that's the common language of that part of the Mediterranean. But Claudius Lysias is surprised because he takes Paul to be an Egyptian Jew who has been stirring up trouble and who has led a murderous group into the desert. And when he hears him speak in Greek, he says, "Wow, you speak Greek." And Paul says, "Yes, in fact, I'm a citizen of the city of Tarsus, no mean city, and I'm actually wanting to address these people." And so Claudius Lysias allows him to speak. And Paul now quickly changes his method of address. And this is how Paul is noted for his reaching out to the audience that he speaks to. So he changes from Greek and he now speaks to them in what the Greek calls Evraistig dialecto, which really means Aramaic. He's speaking to them in the same message of Jesus, the same language Jesus would have spoken. But this causes the crowd to quieten down because they realize that he is speaking to them in their mother tongue, in that sense, in their own language. And Paul basically tells his story, and he says that he was brought up as a God-fearing, law-keeping Jew. He trained at the feet of Gamaliel, who was a leading rabbi who actually appeared earlier and encouraged the leaders not to persecute the church. But he says, as a result of this zeal, that he persecuted the people of what he calls the way. This was the word given for people who followed Jesus. They were called people of the way, and he persecuted them, he said, even to the point of killing some and putting men and women in prison. But then he describes his journey that we've come across earlier in Luke's account, and he says, I was struck from my horse by a great light and the voice of Jesus speaking to him, and he responded. And the story that we already know, that has been blinded by the light, he was taken into Jerusalem, where Ananias, who he says is a faithful man, a keeper of the law. It's interesting that again he raises up the credentials of those who have kept to the Jewish tradition, and he says Ananias was a God-fearing, law-keeping Jew, but he came and prayed for him, saw him healed, he saw, and he was baptized into the name of Jesus. Now, Paul is taking hold of this opportunity. Even though it is going to be costly for him, he's not turning away. And we need to take up those opportunities whenever they come to us, not to run from declaring the good news of Jesus, but to honor and to own what he's done in our lives, because there's nothing stronger than our own story to present the good news of Jesus. Not about argument and rationalism, it's actually about what he's done in our lives, and Paul is quick to own that even in the face of opposition. Have a very good July the 3rd.